Welcome to the Leader Impact Podcast. We are a community of leaders dedicated to optimizing our personal, professional, and spiritual lives to have impact. This show is where we have a chance to listen and engage with leaders from around the world who are living this out. We love talking with leaders, so if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions to make this show even better, please let us know. The best way to stay connected is through our newsletter at leaderimpact.ca or on social media at LeaderImpact. I'm your host, Lisa Peters, and our guest today is Braden Douglas. Braden is the founder of Crew Marketing Partners, one of the fastest growing strategic marketing and creative agencies in Canada. Founded in 2007, Crew has won numerous awards for their service and brand leadership. Braden started his career in brand management at Frito and Procter, but throughout his life, his passion has been helping leaders make a significant impact in the world. He currently volunteers with Leader Impact as a member of the Global Advisory Board, where he plays a key role mentoring leaders, speaking, and developing content. Formerly from Vancouver, BC, Braden has recently moved his family to Dallas, Texas, where he has opened a fourth office. I had the opportunity to do a live follow-up Q&A with Braden many months ago after a keynote, and I'm going to bring some of those questions here today. But the one thing I walked away knowing about Braden is that no one succeeds in life alone. Braden's commitment to the people around him is evident in everything he does. I took this quote from the Crew website. With a strong brand that commands respect and with a higher purpose, you could make the world better for everyone. We really can make a difference with our brand, and once you meet Braden, you'll see he does things differently. So join us now for a conversation with Braden Douglas about his new book and really the idea that no one can succeed alone in your personal, professional, and spiritual life. Welcome to the show, Braden.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It is nice to see you. We actually just finished our big global forum, and I watched your kind of the bonus section of it. So it was nice to see you because you've just recently transplanted yourself to Dallas. How is it?
Yeah, it's been good. Moving countries, starting something from scratch is always scary. It's difficult because it's just you haven't done it in so long. So it feels a little bit like a duck out of water, but the people are fantastic. There's just so much opportunity. It's been great. So the family's transitioning, everybody's kind of getting settled in and just trying to learn everything new again, but it's been great.
Good. And the weather must be better than where I am.
Oh man, the weather is fantastic. 25 degrees. It's beautiful. So I can't complain.
Yeah, that is wonderful. I have some really exciting news. I'm going to share it with you at the end, though, because I'm really excited to hear about your book. But before we begin, I really want you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, you know what? I grew up in the Niagara region, so right by Niagara Falls. Had a great, upbringing. Have a couple siblings. Went to university for a business degree. And then got right into marketing. And so I didn't really know much about the marketing field, but started with Procter & Gamble, marketing fabric softener. Then worked with Frito and PepsiCo, marketing potato chips, which is so much fun, like doing commercials and promotions and, new products. And, you eat a lot of chips. So I am a chip connoisseur.
My dream job.
You know what? You say that, right? You think it's like, oh, it's going to be my dream job. We called it the Frito 15, where everybody who works there, you kind of gain 15 pounds and then you realize, oh, I can't just keep eating chips all day. And so you kind of work it back. But I still love, eating, I do eat a lot of chips still because we own a chip company. But and then from there, I, had a life turnaround and was like, and this was in Toronto. And I was like, well, I just want to give back to the world. I want to make it a better place. So I took a job with a nonprofit in Vancouver and I was in there and I loved it, but I realized that, man, I love business. I love working with entrepreneurs. I love working in the business world. And I realized that almost every strategy of the nonprofit was how do we get businesses and leaders to make an impact, to actually, use their influence, use their money, use their connections to actually help the nonprofit do what they do. And I realized how important that was. And so I went home to my wife, Jen, and I said, hey, hon, I think that there's a possibility of creating a company that, infuses marketing and creative together, but we could help companies make a lot of money, but also have impact, and to be able to use that wisely. And so that was the start in 2007 of Crew, which is our agency, which has now grown, to now we're starting our fourth office, which is pretty neat.
Wow. When I met you the first time, I knew that you're just that caring guy. And that is what I know about you, is that you care about people, you care about entrepreneurs, you care about businesses. So how do you play a positive role in the people around you?
Well, you know what? I think, well, thank you very much for saying that. That's really nice. But I think it's really about, you have to, like, it's not just numbers anymore. And I think in business, what I've learned over the years too, is that there's strategic plans, there's your target audience, there's positioning, there's, pricing strategies and all these different things. But what it always comes down to is people and your employees, your customers, your suppliers, your clients. And for me, is that you really have to get to know them. Like, who are they? What are their spouses like? What do they really like to do? How do you really create value for them? And I think that it's just, if you go through life just thinking, what can I get from somebody? Or either I'm just trying to sell you a product to buy, or I'm just trying to, give you to, come get you to work for me so that I can, pursue my dreams. And I think you have to really change that to say, how do I actually help them? Like, what's really important to them? Even consumers, as we think about our own businesses, you don't just think of your customers just as people who might buy your product, but what's their life like? Who are they really? And is this product or service really going to help them? And do I understand how it's helping them and why they're buying and why they're using it? And it's this empathy, I think, that's really important. I've just learned sometimes the hard way over the years, of getting better at that. But I still think it's about an attitude and a shift that says, I'm just going to give and I'm just going to serve, and I'm going to trust that it works out well. And if it doesn't, that's okay. But you still have to have that mentality of really just caring about them as people first. And then you'll be absolutely surprised that the strategies, the thinking, the ROI does come. But you can't just start off with that mindset.
Yeah, it reminds me of in the forum that we just had, the Leader Impact Forum, and I can't remember what speaker, but you talked about your story. Like, we need to hear your story because your story has impact. And I think that's important in your company.
Yeah, well, I think that, especially as an entrepreneur, the story of me, being in a nonprofit, working with entrepreneurs, working with startups, and now with much larger companies. But it's just about your story has, because nobody else has it, right? Nobody else has your experience. Nobody else has your life, relationships that you have. So it's absolutely critical that how that comes out, it does make a difference, but you have to have a good story. Like, nobody wants a boring story. Like, that sucks. So you kind of have to feel like, what is your story going to be? Are you going to be, what kind of character are you going to have? What kind of adventures are you going to go on? Or are you going to just play it safe your whole life and have, this wake that you've left behind that's just broken and not getting great results? So I think, yes, your story is good, but make it a great story if you're going to do it.
Yeah. In just talking, you spoke about giving. And I know that when you're always giving, how, it takes a lot of energy, right? And how do you get your energy back? How do you gain energy in your personal life? Like, you go home, are you drained?
You know what? Well, let's say even last night, I'm exhausted, and it was like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm just like falling into bed. And I usually like to read before I sleep. And when you read like half a page and your eyes just can't even stay open and you're just zonked. But you know what? I think and I even write about this in my book, is that, when people talk about you have to take care of yourself, but it is really true. You do need to work out so that you can have energy. You can actually, have the kind of energy to be able to give. So for me, it's working out in the mornings. It's eating well. It's being able to have some devotional time so that it's not just all about you. It's actually trying to really learn what God has for you and be like, okay, Lord, what do you want? What do you want? What are you trying to teach me? What do you want from me today? And taking those moments first. So I think the morning time is the critical time, because if you don't do it in the morning, I guarantee you, you won't do it. You just won't find the time to work out or, to do stuff. And if you're always rushing around and you're not planning, you're going to eat poorly because you have to grab it on the go or whatever it is. And so you do have to have that time to just say, okay, what am I trying to do? Have that time in the morning so that you can be that kind of person you want throughout the day. And then for me, I'm just spent at night. And after you play with your kids and you're investing in your family and stuff and working, and you're just like, okay, next day, boom, you just start again.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I find that if I don't take that time in the morning, my whole day seems a little off. Like I'm just rushed. I haven't taken that time to sit down and my time. And I have to get up early sometimes to have my time, but
yeah. And you know what? I've learned that most leaders I know, like the really good ones, they become morning people. And so for me, I have to become a morning person, and now I love it, but it did take a transition. But it's amazing. Some people feel like, oh, I just do my best work at night. And that's great. I would say that's very, very rare. Most people I know, you have to do it in the morning. If you don't like waking up early in the morning, it's like, well, too bad. Like, do you want it bad enough? Like, do you really want to actually do this? Because if you don't, you just want to sleep, then you won't accomplish, I don't think, what you really want to in the day unless you do it.
All right, well, I'm going to shift a little bit. So as a strategic marketing and creative company, you personally have a platform to influence people, from brand influence, marketing management, communication strategies, and more. So how do you use your influence in your personal life? Sorry, in your professional life?
Yeah, well, you know what, professionally, this is where, we get to be, in strategic planning, and it's really about intention. So every company, you go through strategic planning, we're creating marketing strategies and plans, and it's about saying, well, guys, could we actually integrate some charitable initiatives into this? Or what's our giving plan going to look like? Where's our swim lane in terms of the kinds of companies we want to work with, the kinds of activities. And so we can actually integrate those and help clients and help companies integrate these things into their marketing so that, yeah, we're going to sell your brand and we're going to create brand awareness and great market share, but also we can actually integrate really cool initiatives. And so some things we've been able to do is giving back to First Nations and working with them on some of our food products that are, say, seaweed and snacks and different things. We've done some that we've worked with, single families and single mothers, in that, hey, one purchase of this, goes 50% of the proceeds goes to this charity. And we've done so many of these kinds of initiatives where we've helped companies integrate that so that it's practically giving. But it's amazing that we could have just been like, okay, let's just do this really cool ad that's super funny and people just, buy your products. But when you can actually show them and be intentional about, well, how do we use our platform maybe in a different way? Most people are like, yeah, great. They just don't know how to do it. They just don't know where to start or what to do. So that's where we've been able to really integrate a lot of these, which is pretty satisfying.
And I would think, and I don't have any numbers to prove this, you may have to jump in here, but I would buy from someone who I knew was doing something so great in my community. Like if I knew that you were contributing to a program, a charity group, I might go, you know what, I'm going to buy your product.
Yeah, well, right now, it's like 85% of people actually would choose brands that had a social impact, over others that don't. And so there is an element, but you have to do it in a way that doesn't feel like you're just, trying too hard. Like, do you actually, and I think this is why I think it's so important that we work with people who, what's really on your heart? Like, where do you really want to give back to? So we had one company that is a big closet manufacturer. And so if you ever see those, remodel your house, but they loved doing food pantries and they love the food bank. And so we created and so we were like, oh, that's awesome. And it's already a charity that they were giving to that they really loved. And so we said, well, why don't we just integrate for the month of November that anybody who does, closet or pantry reorganization with you is you give back to the food bank. And they were like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yes. Okay, cool. And so they were able to just leverage relationships that they had. And it was something that was really close to their heart already. So it's those kinds of things but you can't fake it. You can't be like, hey, why don't we give back to Children's Hospital? And they're like, Okay. But if they're not passionate about it, and then you can get employees involved, you can get suppliers, you make it a really rallying thing. And I think that's where impact happens, when you sacrifice, when you're giving, when you're really pursuing something to really for the benefit of others. And then saying, you know what, I'm going to use what I have just to make a difference. And I think that is, I love when those come together.
Yeah. That is my favorite saying, make a difference. If I can just make a difference today, just one thing, just, so I do love that. I love your passion. And I hope that all clients, when they meet with you, they're like grabbing onto your ideas, because you really sound like you have amazing, good ideas to help them grow and make and have impact. So I love that.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's fun.
Isn't that great? It's fun. I love that. So in your professional life, who is one person that made an impact on you, and why?
Probably early in my career. So when I was at Frito, I was the youngest person that they've ever hired in their marketing department. And so it was like me and then a bunch of late 20, 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and stuff. And so, and even my nickname in university was, Corporate Canada. And people said, man, you're like an old man trapped in like a 20-year-old's body. And, at the time, you're kind of like, you kind of laugh about it and stuff. But I still remember I would, like, even when my wife met me, she's like, Braden, you wore like the khaki pants with the tucked in golf shirt and your BlackBerry on your hip. And I was like an old soul and trying to fit in with all these older people. But one of my managers, his name was Jason McDonald. And he was the director of marketing at the time. And so I was reporting to him. And it was one of those, in his personality, in the way that he approached the work, was something that was really different. And what it was is that he would just create a positive environment where you felt like your ideas, like he would push you in ways, but it would make it fun. There was lots of high fives. There was this energy that he would bring to it. And it was smart. You were forced to be really strategic, but yet the way that he just rallied others around these ideas, it just really, I remember that impact to being like, man, like that's what I want. Like when you walk into a room and into a meeting, how do people feel? Like, is it, oh, here comes Braden again, it's going to be a little bit, he's going to challenge us and it's going to be a little bit negative? Or do you walk in and it just feels like the room just lightens up, that everybody feels like, man, I can do something here? And it doesn't mean that we don't gloss over or have, those difficult conversations or whatever, but it means that when I saw him leading, he was able to then talk to finance and operations and get people excited about a new initiative. And yeah, it might be difficult, but do you think we can do this? Yeah, we probably can, but here's the issues. Okay, well, let's solve them together. And so it was this element, this idea that really impressed on me, that whenever I want to lead or be with people, I hope that when I go, people are like, man, it was great having Braden in this meeting, or I love working with him. And I just feel like we can actually accomplish this, because anything new is tough. Anything, new ideas, new initiatives, new campaigns, because people hate change. So you have to be able to give them this attitude and belief that, yes, we can do it. Yeah, it's not going to be easy, but hey, let's refine it. Let's make it great together. And so that always kind of stuck out at me.
Oh, I love that. And I think, you as a young guy joining a Frito-Lay, and you're coming in with your BlackBerry on your hip, and you have to, I feel, you have to surround yourself with, you want to grow. So surround yourself with great people, with passion that you want to be like. So, you found someone. So where's this person today in your life?
Well, what's funny is that we always kind of think of mentoring. I kind of talk about this too in the book, is that people think, oh, I need a mentor. I need somebody who's just dedicated to me and just, working through it. And the more I've realized that that's really rare. And I think people shouldn't be looking at just one specific mentor that takes them like Yoda and Luke Skywalker, and you're gonna just have him on your back and you're just running around and he's training you. I think you have to look at mentorship in a community setting. And what I've learned is that who you surround yourself with. So even for me, I've got a leader impact group in the morning that we just actually met this morning, and there's 7 entrepreneurs, great guys, and they are all going through very different things. One guy, his business is going amazing. His wife has breast cancer. And that is taking an extreme toll on him emotionally, on his family, and he's working through that. Another guy, family life and spiritual life are going fantastic, but his business got destroyed by COVID. And he was in the fitness industry, and it was just wrecked it. And then you have another guy who is, his business is going well, his spiritual life is going well. Personally, he's losing friendships because he basically, said, hey, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to change my life around. And it's interesting how friendships are shifting away, and he's working through those. And then they're able to speak into my life. I'm able to speak into their life. You're able to, really help each other really grow. And mentorship for me is about looking at those people who are in your life and then either asking them direct questions. And there's others, investors and stuff that I talk with, and I'm like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Like, what do you think I should be doing? And they take the time and they say, hey, Braden, I know you, I respect you. And so you're able to have those dialogues. And I think mentorship is about the intention of you to seek out advice and to then also be able to pour out into others. And so it's a reciprocal basis. It's you're receiving and then you're giving, and vice versa. And who you surround yourself with is absolutely critical. So I think you have a bunch of mentors in your life and people that you are receiving from, as well as people that you are then also giving to.
I love that. I'm huge about surrounding yourself with lots of people. I never really thought about the mentorship that, that word, right? It's just, you need a mentor. I have a group of people, and we're going to come back to Leader Impact in a bit, but I wanted to ask you about, in your group, we talk about mistakes and failures, and it is more important to learn, or we learn from our mistakes and failures. We learn from those. But would you be willing to share with us one of the greatest failures or mistakes that you learned through it?
Yeah.
Learn.
Yeah. And we kind of joking around that, I've never made a mistake. I don't know what that feels like. I hope it doesn't hurt, but the reality of it is that it's, your life is full of mistakes. It's how you deal with them, how you learn from them, and how you move forward is really the key thing. But about 3 years ago, and this is where, for the first 10 years, our agency was growing super fast. And we started planting offices. I acquired 3 companies, and you just feel like you can't lose. And what started to happen was I became, I think, subtly more prideful as the company was doing better. And the pride kind of led to this idea of, look what I've done. Man, I've made some really good decisions and it's paying off. And, even though you don't say that out loud because you don't want to look like you're, full of pride, but I think internally I was thinking, man, I'm a really good leader. And you start to do this. And then about 3 years ago, about the same time, we had 3 of our largest clients leave. And then not too long after that, another client left, and they left us because they got acquired. A new CMO came in, different circumstances that happened, and all of a sudden our revenue dropped by about 30%. And it was one of those where you start to realize that actually, Braden, like, you don't control a lot of this success. Like, this is really about God's hand in your life. And I felt like at this moment I went through this period of like my identity. I had to lay off people, and that is one of the worst. That's one of the worst things, especially because you pride yourself on great culture and positive, and then to have these conversations with people that that you have to let them go, and they look at you like, man, I trusted you. I trusted you to provide, and I really struggled with this, and it was it took about 8 months. And even during that time, like when the ship is sinking, you can see who's in it with you and who's not. And everybody loves like a great story, a great positive trajectory. But when it goes bad, that's when people start to jump ship. Like, oh man, I don't want to, be here. So we had people resigning. We had, people leaving too. And it just felt like my whole world was unraveling. And at this time I had to say, well, where is my footing? Like, Braden, is your identity just locked into a successful business, a good person, and that's who you are, and that's what gives you confidence. That's what gives you your self-esteem. Or are you getting it from where you should be, which is if you call yourself a Christian, if you call yourself a follower of Jesus and you love God, and it's like, do you really get your identity from that? Or do you get it from professional success? And I would say I got it from God, but I acted as if I did it myself. And that was a really good awakening for me. And it was something that it really, yeah, it really just turned me around, where I was like, oh my gosh, like it felt like a big spiritual spanking. It was just like, bad Braden, but it was a wake up call. And I think that, God disciplines those he loves. Like, it was one where I felt like it was hard, but it was the absolute best thing I needed, because it forced me to evaluate and to actually really come back in a humble way to the Lord, to say, you know what, God, like, my success isn't about what I did, and my failure isn't about what I've done either. It's, you just keep trying your best, doing what you're doing, you're learning, you're growing, but it's all about relationships and people and loving God and loving others. And I had to learn that the hard way. I don't wish that on everybody, but even through even the pandemic, I think we're all learning about how important relationships are, that the world is crazy. You can't predict certain things that are going to happen, or disasters or whatever, but how you work through it is so important.
Well, I feel like that's a bit of a counseling session, Braden, for me. I think I own an events management firm, and when COVID hit, we were done. There was, all events were canceled, the books were cleared, and I had to have those conversations with my planners, and they had to go somewhere else. There was no events, and there's still, we haven't recovered. But I thank you for sharing that, because it's hard to share our failures, but we learn so much from them.
It's true. It is totally true. And you know what? And I think that, people say, oh, you sacrifice to keep employees and this kind of stuff. And I think, yeah, that's commendable, but your main job is to keep the ship afloat, because it will come back again. But I still remember, is that you haven't been in business long enough, or you haven't had a big enough operation, that you will have to lay people off. You will have to let them go, not always by your choice, by circumstance. And you have to realize that I'm not their savior. I'm the one there, but how I do it. And I remember this HR consultant, when I was doing these, he came in and was like, okay, Braden, when you give them the resignation letter, and you don't say a lot about it because you don't want to get sued, and you just kind of give it to them. And then you have somebody walk them to their desk to get their keys, their personal belongings. And then you walk them out, and I was like, oh, okay. And, because I'm not used to doing this. And so I followed that. And I remember thinking, when it was done, I felt like such a low, I just felt gross. I felt like, oh my gosh, like, why would I treat somebody who spent years with us like a criminal? Like, all of a sudden they're just going to start stealing and like wrecking things. And like, don't I know them well enough? And I remember they were like, no, but Braden, this is best practice. And I'm like, man, well, maybe that best practice isn't that best. Like, maybe it's just been that way because you have big corporations who just have faces who are all about litigation. But I thought to myself after that day, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore. We're going to do it just as a human, as somebody who really cares about them. And so now it's about, offering, more severance, helping them find a job, talking them through with this, like giving them options and working with them so that even when they leave, they can come back and say to people, yeah, you know what? It didn't work out, and maybe the company didn't do this or whatever happened, but man, such great people. And I have nothing but great things to say about Crew and Braden. And that's my hope, is that it's not necessarily that we have to do certain things that are hard, but how we do them is such a great reflection of our character.
Yeah. It's our brand, and you're the branding guy. Like, this is Braden's way. All right, well, we're going to switch a little bit to our spiritual side, because I want to hear a little bit about you and your spiritual journey to faith. Throughout this whole podcast, you've dripped a little bit about God and how he's been in your life. So share with us your journey to faith.
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents, they were not Christians until my mom was pregnant with me. And so when she was pregnant with me, she contracted German measles, and she was kind of in her second trimester. And at that time, German measles was going around in Canada, And if you had it, there was a high chance that your pregnancy, that you could have deformities with that. And so she remembers she said, I prayed to God and I said, God, if you let this baby be healthy, I will serve you. I will be all in for you. And so, she had me and I was fine. And then all of a sudden they became like crazy church people. And so they were like the dancers of an Anglican church. Like it was like my mom became the tambourine lady. And so it was like, so I grew up kind of knowing a lot about God, and my parents were fantastic people and things. But as I progressed through life, I got more involved in student council and sports, and I did, with school, and I just started to see Christianity and stuff as almost like a crutch. Like, oh, that's good for people who don't have a lot going on, but I've got lots going on. I'm fine, and so I just kind of drifted. And university, when I was out of my house, it's like I was free. Didn't have to go to church. I'm like, finally, and just lived my own life. And then when I was working, this was at Frito. I was there for about a year and a half or more, and in Toronto, living by myself. And so coming back one night, and I kind of talk about this a bit in my book, where you start to look at your life a little bit differently when crisis hits. And so I remember, working super late one night, being like only one in the office and being like, Braden, like, what are you doing with your life? And I remember driving home. I go upstairs to my room, to my apartment, and I look across in my mirror, and I'm just looking at myself, and I'm like, Braden, you are such a fraud. You are like a mile wide and an inch deep. You're like a puddle. And you have what are you going to do? Are you just going to climb the corporate ladder your whole life? Are you just trying to get that next title, make more money, just try to live your life the way that you think you should live it? And you're maybe a good person and hopefully nothing happens. And, but it's like, where's your soul? Like what? And I just remember almost like crying. Like I just started hating who I was going to, because I was chasing something that I thought was really good, that the world would say, Braden, that's great. Yeah, make more money. You're doing really well. You're getting pats on the back. But inside, I was just living for me. And I knew, because of my parents growing up, I knew that there was more, but I didn't love church. And so I started looking at this. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it on my terms then. So I remember kind of scouring around for churches, and there was a church called the Meeting House, which is in the Toronto area. And it was a church for people who aren't into church. That was their tagline. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. That's me. And so I remember I'm showing up, and it's kind of in this like theater, and it's a startup kind of church. And the pastor gets up there, and his name is Bruxy, and he's got this like long hair, and he kind of looks like an overweight Jesus, a little bit of what I picture Jesus to look like. And he was, the first time, just really clear, like, educated, smart, and they have a Q&A session at the end of his sermons. Like anybody ask questions. And I remember like, wow. Oh my gosh, like most churches don't do this. Usually the pastor stops and he's like, I think I'm in charge here. I know what to do. Okay. No questions, please. But he was it was like open. And then I started being like, okay, this is actually kind of cool. And so I remember went to a young adults, small group, and I'm asking all these different questions and just peppering them, because I'm like, if I'm really going to follow Jesus, I want to know, is this real? Like, I know you guys say he's real, and I know that we have forgiveness for our sins and we have eternal life, but is this really true? Like, does it really make a difference, or are you guys just a bunch of homeschooled kids now that are just hoping to have this relationship? And so I just, the more I started to research, the more I started to read the Bible for myself, going through the Gospel of John and just hearing who Jesus was, hearing what he, that, hey, yes, I'm God's son, but man, I love people. And I challenged those, and, those ones that were religious, the Pharisees and stuff, about where's their heart? Like, where do you really love God? And I remember thinking, yes, that's exactly it. Do I really love God with my whole heart, mind, soul, and strength? And do I love others? And am I really trying to live, for him? And do I know that, that faith in him, forgiveness and this? I'm like, yeah, this is it. And I remember driving home one night, and that just this moment of just like crying, and you're listening to this and you're like, Braden, you cry a lot. And I'm like, I don't cry. I don't usually, but I just felt like in that moment I was just in this car, and I just felt like that the Holy Spirit just in there. I'm just like crying and be like, God, I am so sorry for living my life on my own. Like, I really do need a savior, and you're it. And I want to follow you. And I remember that was about 25 at the time, and thinking, yeah, this is real. Like, this is legit.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that moment, it's about just learning and growing, and and just seeing the refinement in your own life. And my friends like that, they were like, "Oh, Braden, you're different now, and this is odd, but we like it. It's positive. It's like you start living like for heaven. You start living for eternity. Like, how can I make a difference?" And that's what really propelled me then to go to the nonprofit and to do stuff. And my whole life trajectory has changed because of that. And so that's kind of the nutshell, long version, short version.
It's a great version. And I love that you shared that, because I think there's a lot of people that grow up, myself and my husband grow up in a certain faith, and we went away from it. It's the similar story to yours. We went away from it, and we came back to find something that was great for us. And now we're raising our children in that. And in saying that, I'm going to raise my children the best I can in our family. And one day I hope, I hope whatever their decision is, I'm going to raise them and hope they follow God. I don't know what church they'll go to. Maybe they'll go to the church that isn't for church people. But that's a great story.
But you know what? But this is where I think that I want to be a Christian that other people that would say, if that's what being a Christian is like, that's pretty cool. I like that. I like that version. I don't know what you've got, but I like this. And it's not about church or denominations or whatever. It's about, do you really love God? Do you know him? Like, and then you get to read the Bible about trying to really understand who God is. Like, what's going on here? What's the context? And Jesus, what was he trying to actually do in the sacrifice, and why that makes a difference? And it's funny, you kind of talk to a lot of Christians or a lot of people who may have had a church background or maybe a Catholic or different stuff. And what I find is that they just haven't taken the time to discover it themselves, or they've had bad examples in their world of Christians that have called themselves Christians, but they're not really living it, or maybe they're hypocrites or something. They had a negative experience, and I just feel like, oh man, just don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Like, it's so good and it's so amazing. And just because you had one bad experience, or maybe even a few, it's like, you will find a good community, and you will find people that are different. But here's the thing, is that it's open to everybody, right? If you go into a church, it's not like a church for perfect people. It's a place for broken, sinful people trying to figure it out themselves, and life is crazy and they make dumb choices and they're still trying to work things out. But the idea behind it is, but I want to, be more refined. I want to actually love God better. And if I'm not, then help me to do that well.
Yeah, definitely not perfect here. So thanks for good point. So how did you become involved in Leader Impact?
So in the early 2000s, a good friend of mine went on a global exchange to Panama. And she came back, and she was kind of my age, and she was, and she's like, "Oh, Braden, you love leadership and all this kind of stuff. You gotta, check out Leader Impact. And there's a guy named Ian Whitfield who's coming into our city. You should go have lunch with him." So I'm like, "Oh, okay, sure." I didn't even know who they were or whatever. And so I had lunch with Ian, and there's a few of us there, and I'm like, "Man, this sounds amazing. Like, this sounds really cool." And so from there, I got to know the organization a little bit. And when I went to British Columbia, there was no Leader Impact out in the West Side. There was maybe an event, but nothing that we would say would be Leader Impact. So I talked with Esther DeWaldy and Preston Wheeler. And so Esther is the CEO of Phantom Screens, and Preston, was a hog farmer who now was kind of working at Leader Impact, and we were like, hey, we should start a group. And so we said, okay, let's start this out. And this was in Abbotsford, British Columbia, which is a city just outside of Vancouver. And so we got together with about 7, 8 others, and we said, okay, let's start this up. And we were like, okay, this is really good. So we said, guys, like, could we make this even better? And so we went through this burst in your bubble kind of sessions together as a group of 7 of us. And then we said, okay, well, let's invite others. And so we all invited, people, and there's about 20 of us meeting at Esther's corporate, meeting room in her manufacturing facility. And so we said, okay, well, what are we going to do with them? And so we said, well, I was like, well, why don't we do John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership? That was the book that we said, okay, let's go through that. It was about 10 weeks, and we met in the mornings at 7 a.m. and we went till 8:30. And we went through this, and it was great. People loved it. It was 20 people in a room too. So lots of people. It was busy. We were bringing in muffins and just trying to make it like a really fun time. And we thought, okay, 20 is getting a little bit big. We should probably split off. And so I said, Esther, okay, you take 10. I'll take 10 and meet at my office in my boardroom. And then we started with 2 groups, and then we started with, and those broke off. And then there was about 4 and then 6. It started to really kind of grow from that. And that's where we started to then figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do after we're done this? And so we started just writing content and curriculum, and this small group model that Leader Impact has adopted has kind of started out of what Esther and myself and Preston were doing, and even the content. And so that's when we just started to, even then we created the integrated life series, which a lot of Leader Impact groups use today. And just the format. And so it started out in kind of the west side of Canada, and now has, started to grow.
I think I love doing this podcast, but my cheeks hurt so bad from smiling. Like, I'm just like, this is amazing. I never knew that about you, Braden. Yeah. That's really exciting. So leading right into your book, you've written a book called Becoming a Leader of Impact, which is now being used by Leader Impact groups, I'm going to say around the world, because in the global summit, I saw your book behind people. Like they're doing their thing, and it's right behind them, and I'm laughing because it's yellow. I can definitely see the book. So tell us how you laid the foundation of your life to become a person of faith and impact.
Well, I think, even that book was out of Leader Impact to say, hey guys, we do all these business books with Patrick Lencioni and Jim Collins and Henry Cloud. And I thought, what, we need our own. We've got great leaders in Leader Impact. Like, we should really have our own and be one that talks about our philosophy. And so that's where, if you ever mention an idea to a nonprofit, usually they come back with, hey, that's a great idea. You should do that. And you're like, oh, okay. I'm not sure I'm going to find time. But this is where you're just like, okay, yes, I think we should do that. And this philosophy of your personal, professional, and your spiritual life was a concept that I started to use a lot with Leader Impact. And then they've really adopted it and say, yeah, this aligns because, my life and what Leader Impact is about, like, this is it. And there's so many other leaders and people listening to this right now that, yeah, your professional, your personal, your spiritual life coming together to be a leader who has impact. That's what it's all about. And so for me, it was about saying, well, professionally, I want to be great at what I do. And I think as a leader, you have to be great at what you do in order to have credibility, or in order to have resources to be able to use more effectively. And so my hope is that when people come to Leader Impact, or even for me, is that I always want to be learning. I want to be reading. I want to be challenged. I want to keep growing as a professional as a marketer, but also as a leader. And so that was really an important aspect. And then personally, this is about relationships. This is about the relationship. This is about mastery over yourself and your time and your self-discipline. But it's also about mastery of your external relationships, whether you're married or you have a significant other, your kids, your family, your friends, your neighbors, your employees, the people that have been put in your life. Because if you can't impact them, you're not going to impact anybody. And I think so many times some leaders, we look at the masses, but we forget the micro, like the really important relationships. And those are the ones that are so important. And we all have these spheres of influence that we have been given. And I believe that if you can't have impact those around you, those closest to you that really know you, you're not going to impact others. So are you investing in their life? Are you caring about them? Are you helping them achieve what they need to achieve? And do you know what those are? And so really helping people work through that. And then spiritually is that if you don't have a spiritual life, if you don't really want to, follow God and really understand, his ways of doing it, then your professional and personal life become very self-focused. They become very about what can I get out of this? I want to grow. I want to have this new vacation property and earn more money and retire comfortably and all these things that the world would say is important. But once you have a spiritual life and you realize what God wants and the life that he calls you to, of being other-centered and giving and pouring into something that's bigger than yourself, and that it was just like, whoa. And so for me, it's like, I want that. And when you combine that with being a great professional that has resources and a platform, who is pouring into relationships that they've been giving that are now other-centered and for the benefit of others, you become the leader who's going to have impact. And that's what I think the book and everything is all about.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to tell you, you have made an impact on me in the times that I've met you and the times that I've interviewed you. And I have started a new group I've been in Leader Impact since 2015. I started a new group that we're Zoom, and I'm bringing in people from around my province. So not because you're Zoom. So I've got someone, I've got a member of the Legislative Assembly who's sometimes in Esteban, and we've got some people in Saskatoon. So I'm really excited. And yours is the first book we're going to do.
No way. That's awesome. Well, congratulations. Yeah. It's, here's the thing. I commend you because it's tough. There's always pain at the beginning. You have to recruit them. You got to tell them what it's about. Hey, do you want to come join this group? And they're always like, well, and they're trying to figure it out. And it's like, but taking that initiative, like, that's amazing. Thank you, Lisa, for doing that.
Oh, you might. Yeah, I'll be looking for some prayers. I'm super nervous, but I mean, I've been in it so long. So my final question for you, Braden, because I think you've really talked about leader impact, is what. And so I don't need to ask any more about that. But thank you for sharing everything. And my last question is, what brings you the greatest joy?
Oh man, great question. You know what? I love to play. And what brings me the greatest joy is that when I get to play with others. And so when people come to our house, I love playing games. So in our neighborhood, we play this like manhunt with the kids, right? So, and I just turned into like a big kid. And so we had this like dinner party, and usually the parents were kind of sitting down here, and the kids are playing. But I always say, okay, guys, after dinner. Okay, great. Okay, parents. Okay, let's go. We're going to go play manhunt with the kids. And they're all like, what do you mean we're going to play manhunt? Like, parents don't do that. And I'm like, no, we're all playing. And so we all the parents are into it, and man, like, you have so much fun. And I love just, integrating play with our kids, with families, with others, because it breaks down barriers. And you can't help but have a huge smile and just enjoy it. And your kids love it, and everybody just has a great time. And for me, what brings me joy is when you get to play with friends and family and people and stuff, because you just get to enjoy each other's company. You get to just have fun with each other. And so for me, that brings me a ton of joy. Oh,
Braden, you're awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. Almost 50 minutes. Thank you for taking that time out of your life, your day, to share with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great. And I hope I hope you have a lot of fun too. And congratulations on your group. Hopefully it goes really well.
Yes. Thank you. Well, I feel pretty blessed to be part of this podcast and just being able to dive deep with you and an opportunity to read your book. I'm super excited about that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So to everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed meeting Braden Douglas. You can find him at crewmarketingpartners.com or bradendouglas.com. Leader Impact is a global movement dedicated to leaders having a lasting impact. We believe that true impact occurs when your personal, professional, and spiritual life is fully engaged. We have a network in over 350 cities from around the globe. We host live and virtual events throughout the year and have a growing network of peer groups that meet weekly across these. Our podcast is just one of the ways to help you accelerate your growth as a leader. If you're part of Leader Impact, you can always discuss or share this wisdom with your group. And if you are not yet in a Leader Impact group, we would love to have you. So check out the groups available in your area at leaderimpact.ca or get in touch with us and we will connect you. Stay in touch with our newsletter at leaderimpact.ca or on social media. And remember, the impact starts with you.